Good evening, everybody. My name is George Dempsie, and I'm a board member of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. We would like to welcome you to our second Central Pennsylvania chapter meeting of this year, and I will be your moderator this evening. I'd like to introduce a couple people to you tonight, and then also introduce our speaker for the evening, Greg Williams. Before I do that, I would like to just briefly talk about PA IPL. We see creation care and habitat restoration as one of our very important activities. Our unofficial motto is, if you care for the creator, then care for creation. And two of the ways that we try to show that is, first of all, our tree and native bush planting, because we know that trees are one of the best ways to capture carbon. I'd also like to just share a 1-minute story that also kind of illustrates another reason why we do our tree planting. This is from a book called Parables by Megan McKenna. There was once an old Jewish man. All he ever did in his spare time was to go to the edge of the village and plant fig trees. People would ask him, "Why are you planting fig trees? You're going to die before you can eat any of the fruit they produce." But he said, "I've spent so many happy hours sitting under fig trees and eating their fruit. Those trees were planted by others. Why shouldn't I make sure that others will know the enjoyment that I've had?" I like that brief parable because it kind of shares the other reason that we plant, because we our work is important to future generations. So this evening with us, helping us with our tech here at the beginning, is our PA IPL director, David Hain Menendez. David, did you want to say a hello?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm watching my children at the moment, so.
Well, we appreciate your help. And then we're going to take just a couple minutes for Kathy Habrowski, our development associate, to talk about a program that they're starting off here with PA IPL. Kathy?
Thank you, George, and thank you all for joining us tonight. This is a big planting group and an enormous group of fundraisers and supporters that have been part of our bike and hike, supporting George and Greg for their ride and hike this year. Thank you all if you have been one of those folks who have supported them. They are two of our biggest riders right now, or hikers right now, so we really appreciate your help. Don't be afraid to still register for the bike and hike. If you need help with that, please reach out to me at outreach@paipl.org. We are still registering riders and walkers and teams of riders and walkers, and we would appreciate any sponsors that you could send our way. And we just want to have you join us. So if you want to join us for an Advocacy Day of Planning, we have those scheduled. I can steer you towards the website so you can choose the date that's best for you. Sorry, I don't have that handy right now. Let me grab that really quick. On Thursday, May 19th from 5 to 6 and Friday, May 20th from 12 to 1. And I'll put the address for that in the chat once I've introduced our grant work. So we'd love to have you join us for our bike and hike, either as a biker, a hiker, a sponsor of a rider or the ride itself, or for our Advocacy Days of Action. And there are going to be more Advocacy Days of Action as well. So we look forward to that. We also want to tell you about how we're expanding our work in 2022. That's largely from the help of folks like you who do fund our bike ride and our annual conference and support us for individual meetings. But we've been very fortunate this year to receive three DEP grants and a climate action campaign grant and another grant from IPL. The Climate Action Campaign and the IPL are for outreach and community activism and advocacy. The DEP Growing Greener Plus grant, which Sheila Noss is going to be coming on board to help us with in Central PA, is a grant that's going to help the Pennsylvania DEP comply with US EPA watershed protection plans and water conservation plans. So the work that you do in planting will be instrumental in helping us to repair impaired streams throughout our area. This DEP Growing Greener Plus grant is a 3-year grant of $140,450 some odd dollars. So we're very excited about this. It's going to give us quite an opportunity to reach out with a watershed protection and water conservation program. In the first year, we'll be starting in southwestern PA in specific regions of what are called restoration priority areas. These are where the streams are the most impaired. In southwestern PA, it'll be the Castleman River watershed, which is part of the Youghiogheny River, and it's in Somerset County. And this is largely due to siltation from agricultural and acid mine drainage sources. It's also the Poplar Run watershed and tributaries in Fayette County, also due to agricultural siltation. In Philadelphia County, the Wissahickon Creek watershed due to nutrients from municipal point sources, urban runoff, and storm sewers. And then in Center County, Half Moon Creek watershed due to agricultural siltation. And in your area in Central PA, Northwest Lancaster County, the Cheeks Creek and its watersheds, and Octero and Fishing Creeks in South and Southwest Lancaster and Westchester counties. And those are all due to siltation and nutrients from agricultural sources. Then in years 2 and 3, as part of that grant, we'll be expanding to even more impaired streams. So we'll be reaching out to you to find out where you would like us to work with you in years 2 and 3. And then we also received 2 DEP environmental education grants. Each of those is $20,000. I'm sorry we didn't apply for more of them, but we do have the 2. One will be in southwestern PA working with Ballfield Farm and Garfield Community Farm in the Pittsburgh area. These are urban organic farms, and we'll be building on that watershed protection and water conservation program to include energy, water and waste conservation, human health and environmental health, climate justice, air and water pollution, or urban organic farming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in southeastern Pennsylvania, we'll be working through David with the Juniata Park Academy and with our friends from the First United Methodist Church of Germantown, more affectionately known as FUMCOG. So we're going to be expanding those programs. If things go really well, which we know we will because we'll get lots of support from our staff and volunteers, the DEP may continue those grants each for $20,000 in years 2 and 3. So we could be coming your way with more education in 2023 and 2024. And the reason we want to talk with you about the grants is we've received some smaller community impact grants as well. One from Duquesne Light here in Pittsburgh with Ballfield Farm was a $5,000 grant to support urban organic farm infrastructure at Ballfield Farm. So we'd like to work with all of you on similar projects. So think about what we might be able to work on with you. We can get as much as $5,000 from small grants. Sometimes they're $1,000, sometimes $2,500, sometimes $5,000. So if you have a particular project you're working on where you're going to be receiving trees from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, then we'd be happy to try to work with you to expand your impact through grant funding and PA IPL volunteers. For example, doing that in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Blueberry Project, where during Earth Week of 2022, 1,000 blueberries were distributed and planted across the region in that 1 week. And I know from Greg and George, they do similar mass planting events like that in Central PA. And so we want to just keep that momentum going 2022, 2023, and 2024. So keep me posted. I'll find money for you if you need it.
Thanks for your hard work, Kathy. We really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. It's really a pleasure.
So our speaker tonight is Greg Williams, and he's going to be sharing his insights on our group's creation care work. So I'll turn it over to Greg now.
Thanks, George. So thank you everybody for coming. This is a great group. I love the fact that there's so many people that I haven't met before, and that that we can kind of introduce some new stuff to new people. So that's wonderful. As I go along, if you have a question, I don't mind being interrupted and answering it as we go. You can also hold them or put them in the chat room, and George can get them to me at some point. So whatever works for you, okay? And I'm going to do some talking in the beginning, but I'm also hoping that there will be kind of input from you folks later on in terms of your practices. There are a lot of different ways to go about planting trees, and not all of them as successful as each other, but there are many that are equally successful. And so sharing those with one another would be, I think, a very useful thing. We have some old pros on tonight who have planted with us for several different seasons, and I hope that they will speak up and share their practices and remind me of things that I should have said, because there is much to be shared here. I always kind of like to begin by putting our creation or care or habitat restoration efforts in a context, kind of the big picture. I was an environmental educator for about 30 years in California and Ohio and Philadelphia, particularly working with young kids. I left that, owned a bookstore for 15 years and retired about 6 years ago. At the same time, I happened to have a grandchild born, and I realized that the world was a mess, and that my retirement was short-lived, and that I needed to pick up another job, and that job is trying to do something about the climate. It took me a while to kind of figure out what it was I wanted to do. I had to do an awful lot of educating myself. I'm continuing to educate myself about it. Climate change and climate change response is a moving target, very much a moving target. So we're kind of constantly figuring it out. But I wanted to kind of tell you the path I took and kind of what I'm about in terms of planting. You may be about something totally different in terms of planting native plants, and that's fine. And I'd love to hear about that. I've been planting, and we moved here 6 years ago, not long after my retirement, and to be close to grandchildren. And we started the program of doing some habitat restoration, not about planting trees initially. We were really about removing non-native invasives, because that's what I had been doing with children for some time in Philadelphia and Ohio, and actually in the Bay Area at Point Reyes National Seashore. I knew that I loved doing that work. I knew that it couldn't do much harm, but I didn't have the full picture. And so we started with a work party in October of 2016 at Walnut Springs, after I got permission from Walnut Springs chief arborist, Alan Sam, to start doing that sort of work. I was looking for kind of public places where I could do that kind of work. I also approached the Lauer Trail, the Central Pennsylvania Rails to Trails, and asked if I could do the work, and was delighted that they also accepted my offer. So we started off with work parties about six years ago in the fall. The first one was in conjunction with our PA IPL annual conference in State College. And at that point, we started working in Walnut Springs Park, where there was a bird blind at the marsh, and it was so overgrown with non-native invasives that you could not look out of the bird blind. The openings were totally covered with non-native invasives, privet 10 feet tall. So we started there, and we're still working there. In fact, I was working there this afternoon with Ron, who's on the call here as well. And it's a long process doing habitat restoration. It's not a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing process. As I said, we were looking for public places. We approached them, had that good luck to be allowed to do that. I've also introduced myself to Huntington Conservation District. And I'm mentioning these particular places to give you ideas of where you might be able to do such work if you think that you want to do it kind of in a public sort of way, as well as not only on your own land, but at public places, and to gather volunteers of your own and do that work. I've got this little dot of rainbow right on my beard. Do you see that dancing? It's coming in through my window here. I don't know whether that's a pixie or what. Anyway, so we've done it with Huntington Conservation District. I introduced myself to Clearwater Conservancy and John Fredericks at Bellwood Antis Township, who was working on moving the Bell's Gap Trail towards Altoona. And those are kind of some of the areas where we're working right now. I've also had the benefit of tutelage from all those folks. Colleen at Clearwater has been a wonderful mentor. Jody Wallace, who's on tonight, has been a wonderful mentor. Angie Spignoli, all the folks at Huntington Conservation District have really helped me kind of figure out how I could go about it in the particular areas where I'm working. I also, about the same time as I was trying to educate myself about climate change, came across the information from drawdown.org and got kind of a bigger picture of 100 different things that could be done, that 100 different approaches to responding to climate change that were already proven to be efficacious, that were ranked according to their impact on climate change. And that knowledge is constantly changing, constantly being updated. I first came across it in the New York Times and also in their book called Drawdown. Now they're pretty much entirely virtual and online, and their research and is getting refined all the time. But what really excited me was the news that doing habitat restoration in temperate forests ranked as in the top 20% of actions that would have an impact on climate change. And it's really because it's all about carbon sequestration, that our large eastern forests are a mere shadow of what they used to be. And there's good reason for that. There's a need for agriculture. There's a need for other uses of land. But there's lots of places that could be replanted. And so that's why I started seeking out those kind of public places where planting would not only get more trees in the ground and do more carbon sequestering, but also would help beautify public places and increase the biodiversity there. That what does the carbon sequestration about is basically soaking up the excess carbon dioxide in the air, and that excess carbon dioxide in the air is basically the engine that is driving global warming and climate change. And that the trees take that carbon dioxide in through respiration, and they not only put it into their trunk and into their limbs and their roots, but they also deposit it in the ground, and which actually increases the fecundity of that land, and it stays there by and large. So it's kind of not a totally a permanent sequestration, but much of it is permanent, which is a great solution. I also, at that point, started trying to figure out how I could go about planting. And at that point, the only thing that was available that I could find anyway was getting bare root trees from Howard Nursery, which was a good source. They were very small bare root trees. I hadn't learned anything about tubes and stakes to protect them at that point. So I planted those, and those plantings have not been really very successful. There's a few plants that made it. I come across them every once in a while, but by and large, they didn't do very well. And when I started going to and getting involved in the Mid-Atlantic invasive program and learning about non-native invasives in this area, I knew what they were in Philadelphia. I knew what they were in Ohio. I knew what they were in California, but this was a whole different kind of, the Appalachians was a whole different ball game for me. So I needed education there and got help from Norris Muth at Juniata College, and started meeting people and kind of figuring out the lay of the land in terms of habitat restoration. At that point, I also came across the work of Doug Tallamy. And Doug Tallamy made a big change in kind of how I approach this. I don't know if everybody knows him. This is how high tech I am. I printed out something and I'm holding up for you to see him rather than putting pictures in here. But he wrote the book, Bringing Nature Home. I've met with Doug Tallamy and talked to him a couple of times. What he's about, he's an entomologist from the University of Delaware. He was a gardener. He had exotic plants. He had a beautiful garden. And he came to realize that he didn't have much in the way of wildlife in his garden anymore, even though he was an entomologist. And put two and two together and realized that he wasn't taking care of the native insect population, that in fact that the native insects could not eat the exotic, beautiful, diverse plants that he was growing in his garden. And has turned around and over time removed those exotics and planted native. And found that in his garden anyway, that he started bringing back insects. And because when he started bringing back insects, he started bringing back native birds. And the whole food chain was more effective. He's also done quite a bit of research since then. This is probably 10 or 15 years. And the research is showing that that's a big deal too. That appealed to me greatly because the carbon sequestration that comes with native plants is one thing, but the other problem with the disruption that comes with climate change is that the biodiversity is decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. There seems to be research that indicates that the number of native insects has declined by somewhere around 30% over the last 30 or 40 years. And if I always like to think about it, when I was growing up in the Midwest, if you drove somewhere at night, when you got home, you could barely see out of your windshield because they were splattered with insects. That doesn't happen anymore. And I found that very telling. And that's because those native insects cannot eat the predominant understories, which is now non-native invasives like privet, like bush honeysuckle, multiflora rose, oriental bittersweet. There's only about 5 or 10 of the big hitters, but they've had a huge impact. They have shouldered out the native shrubs, the understory. They have prevented the growth of native saplings. You're not seeing much regeneration going on in our forests. And doing the work that we're doing, and I think that most people are doing, makes a difference in that. All the public places we work in do not allow use of pesticides or herbicides, so we don't. So it's a tedious job of cutting them back, pulling them when we can. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of person hours. But one of the things that we have found over the years is that not only do we make space to plant natives, but the natives that were there start coming back. I remember coming across maple leaf viburnum at Walnut Springs Park and thinking, what is this? I've never seen this before. It's a new plant to me. And it was the native that was hidden under there that was stifled by the lack of sunlight, stifled by the competition for root space by the natives. And once we started removing that, it started growing. And I find that time and again that plants, even in my own yard here, I inherited, or I bought land that was totally over sprayed with herbicide, and basically had a barren hill behind me with Norway maple everywhere. Just what I wanted for my first owned land. But it's coming back. The Norway maples I'm cutting those out. I'm pulling them when possible, and I'm planting stuff there. But I also don't need to be planting as much as I thought I would. I came across skunk, not cabbage, but skunk. Can't think of the name of it. Skunk currant. And I thought, what's this? And well, it had been there, kind of hiding out. Wild ginger is covering my hillside now, and it wasn't there originally. So that there's a benefit to removing those non-natives besides creating space. From talking to people, I also learned about the use of tubes and stakes and what a big difference that makes as we plant these native plants. It's not a perfect solution. The tubes stifle the normal growth pattern of many plants. And lots of folks, and some of the folks who are on this call tonight actually have alternatives to that, and they may be willing to talk about that, of caging their plants. I just don't have the time and the person power to do that. So I try to cut back my tubes as quickly as I can, and hope for the best. But we'll hear more about that too. At one of the places where I also got more education was through DCNR's riparian buffer meetings, which met annually until COVID came along, and haven't really met except online since then. But learned a great deal from them, and I really appreciate that. It's also where I first found out about the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the trees that were available for them. And we soon after that became a partner with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and they have a program which is going to be the subject of tonight's talk primarily, called 10K, and their goal is to put 10 million native trees and shrubs in Pennsylvania by 2025, in primarily along waterways, primarily in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. They are somewhere around, I think, 4 million at the moment. And it has been kind of a slow and steady climb in the amount of trees that they make available. Previous to them kind of starting this program about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it is now, there were very few native nurseries around. I think Mike and Laura can attest to that, how hard it was to get native plants anywhere. They have created a market, a big market, and they're paying the price of that, in that lots of people are starting to buy native, and so Chesapeake Bay Foundation has a supply and demand problem. They have fostered quite a few different nurseries to create trees for them. And this last spring, they put out somewhere around 450,000 trees to free with tubes and stakes, and we got about 4,700 of those ourselves. That's big impact. That's big impact, and it's very exciting. We became a partner. We started getting churches to consider adopting areas in some of these parks. We got more workers through youth groups. We got a commitment from Juniata College and their students to come and work regularly, and they've had a huge impact at the Alpharetta Trailhead of the Lauer Trail. We've worked with Williamsburg Elementary School and high school. Had a big event last year where we had a couple of hundred kids planting in October. I've worked with Jody Wallace and John Frederick and Angie Spagnoli on those sort of effects, or those sort of programs, and have kind of managed to put a lot of plants in the ground. I got also involved at somewhere along there with live staking, which is another way of putting plants in the ground. It's cutting, taking cuttings off of not all native plants, but particularly wetland plants, the dogwoods, sycamore, those sorts of plants, taking cuttings 18 inches long, pointing them at the bottom end closest to the root, and basically just driving them into the ground in a place where they might grow. And doing that from December through about March or April, doing it as quickly as you can after you cut them, put them in the ground. And during the winter, they start rooting. And we've had good luck with that. It's not, the success rate is not quite as high as it is for planting native plants, but it's a high success rate, and you can't beat the price. It's free. You know, we do a lot of cutting, for instance, of 9-bark along the Lauer Trail. The Lauer Trail seems to have kind of a corner of the market on 9-bark, and we can collect a lot of it. We work with a collective out of the University of Susquehanna, Susquehanna University, where we can cut plants, send them to them. They put them in a walk-in cooler, and then they redistribute those. We get plants from other places, so it's a way of kind of expanding again our biodiversity here. And we started that. We've got chapters of PA IPL in Scranton and that area, and the Pittsburgh area now doing creation care pretty regularly. Most of my work was done with the 3-county area here of Blair County, Center County, and Huntingdon County. COVID came along, and the first year of COVID, I had ordered more. I found out all of a sudden that I had ordered more plants that I could plant because I had less volunteers. Everybody was scared. It was unclear whether we could work together outside safely. And so I was doing a lot more planting myself, and not without much help from other people. And I had, by that point, maybe 200 or 300 volunteers who, I'd send an email out to weekly, and they'd come when they could come. But out of that, I sent an email out saying, I've got extra plants, do you want them? And I got this huge response and got rid of all my plants. Probably had about 30 planters who came and got plants from me. I asked CBF for forgiveness rather than permission. And so I was able to do it that first year, and they thought, and I said, this is really successful. There's a lot of people who have private land, who have wetlands, who have creeks going through them, and they would love to have plants. And so they said, okay. And all of a sudden I became not just a planter, but a distributor. And that's how I distributed 4,700 plants this spring. And that's a challenge that I could use some help on, and I'll talk about that a little later. I'm in way over my head in terms of the distributor game. I've been learning a lot as I go, but whew, that's a workout. So given all that background, I wanted to tell you in terms of next spring, or next fall, I mean, how the system works and how that big picture of the system works. You should have hopefully gotten a list of native plants that they think will be available this fall. If you didn't, please send me an email and I'll send you that list. It is still a draft. CBF has a partners meeting on Thursday. I may get a new list then. The list is never final until they say it's final. And that will probably be somewhere near the end of May. So once if you have the list that's out there right now, I would suggest you start taking a look at it, but I don't want to receive orders from anybody yet. I would rather wait until we kind of know with a little more certainty what plants are going to be available. In the fall is only seedlings. And seedlings come in a variety of sizes. I had written myself a note to get a prop and I forgot to do it, but they basically come in what we call rocket tubes, which is about, they're about 10 inches tall, probably about that wide. And they have a pretty deep root system, or they have the capacity of having a pretty deep root system. Octorero, which is a really wonderful native plant nursery, tends to use them. And they're the creme de la creme as far as I'm concerned. They put out beautiful plants, healthy plants. And those will, I think probably Octorero will be supplying in the fall. I don't know who the planters are yet. There's another planter who puts out smaller rocket pots, which are, about this big, maybe 4 or 5 inches, a little less square, a little less root system. But in the fall, it will only be containerized seedlings, those 2 different kinds. In the spring, they will also put out bare roots, and the bare roots have been coming from something called Aquatic Resources, something, and they're down in the Baltimore area. The bare roots are a whole different kettle of fish. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So one of the things I would suggest you do is you take a look at that list and start looking to expand your knowledge of those plants. What do they need? Where can they be planted? What's their sun needs? What's their general habitat? And there's lots of ways you can find out that information. My particular favorite is the Missouri Botanical Garden, which isn't our area at all, but they have a really good searchable, easily searchable, comprehensive list on all the plants, almost all the plants that are available. And they talk about zonation, height, spread, blooming time, bloom description, what kind of sun it needs, what kind of water it needs, how much maintenance there is. And then they go into the culture and where you would normally find it. And I find that information very useful. You know, I'm going to get to know the plant best by planting it, caring for it over the years, but it gives me a head start. The other thing that you could do in the meantime, once you order plants for the fall, is start making some spaces for them. And chances are that if you have a garden right now, that you probably have some non-native invasives that you didn't even know were non-native invasives. Privet being the biggest, the most common one, bush honeysuckle being another common one. And one of the best places that I've found anyway for getting education about them is actually PSU Extension. They have a very comprehensive list of non-native invasives that have been identified in this area with pretty good pictures, pretty good descriptions. They give you some pictures of what looks like it and what could be confused with it. The best way is hands-on, but if you don't have access to hands-on or somebody to teach you that, this is a good way to start. And start removing those, start making space, pull them up if you can, get rid of the roots so they don't grow again on your property, get rid of the berries if you can, but start making room for them and start making plans for where you're going to plant. The timetable for ordering for fall hasn't been set yet. Last year, we started ordering kind of the first week of June. It's my understanding that we will probably start about the middle of June this year. Again, I might get confirmation of when that will start this Thursday, and if so, I will let you know. Again, a reason to send me an email or put your email. Actually, it'd be better for you to send me an email than to put your email in the chat, because it'll take me a while to get the chat. Let me give you my email so you can send me your email if I don't already have it. It is wacmbook@aol.com. So is the name of my bookstore, Walk a Crooked Mile Book. So WACM, Walk a Crooked Mile Book, no S on that, at AOL.com. Send me your email, tell me you were on tonight and that you want, you know, to be added to the planter list. And then I will send you all the information I have. When we get those dates, I will let you know when I need to have your orders in. And I would suggest that you send it, if possible, using the database that has already been printed. The one that is, let me show you, I printed mine out a while ago. What did I do with it? There's about 70 plants on there at the moment. Here it is. Looks like this. And basically, if it says no, that means that they are not going to be available this fall. But if they say yes, then the chances are good that they are. These are pretty stock items from CBF. They carry, there's not many new ones in here. This is kind of their main stuff. The bare roots add some other possible ones, particularly a little more wetland plants in the spring. And that put it up around 90 or 95 species for this last spring. That's a lot of variety. That's really quite a wonderful list to go through. So I would ask you to send me that. I need the address where they're going to be planted. or the coordinates of where you want to plant. I will need to report this to Chesapeake Bay Foundation, who need to report it to DEP, who needs to report it to the consortium that is using tree planting to protect the Chesapeake Bay. I think it's a 5-state compact. And Pennsylvania is addressing their kind of lagging in that effort to clean up the Chesapeake Bay. And they're addressing it mainly through this tree planting. So they need our data. The distribution or the awarding, I guess, if you want to call it that, of plants goes on a priority system. And the priorities are set by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation according to those counties which have the biggest problem. So many of the priority 1 counties are in kind of southeastern Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, York County, et cetera. Center County happens to be one of them, and I'm not sure exactly why, but I like it. It's great because we have a lot of people in Center County, so they kind of get first shot. And priority 1 means that that group of people will get to choose in the very first week of the open bidding. It's not even bidding, the open ordering. And they have the best chance of getting the widest variety of plants. Once they start ordering, sometimes you will find that some of the plants disappear from the list. So you may give me an order for something that is that you'd really like to have, and if you're in priority 2, by the time I get to priority 2, which is the second week, that plant may not be available. Huntington, for instance, is in priority 2. Blair County is in priority 3. Outside the Chesapeake Bay watershed is priority 4, and that includes Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Now, this last year, this last spring, they had so many trees with the 450 some odd thousand trees that when they got to the end, they'd only distributed about 250,000. So that Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and some other areas all of a sudden had kind of chance to get a lot of plants. They didn't get all the plants. For instance, the blueberry was gone by the end of the first 20 minutes of priority 1. It just went. I didn't get any. All right. Well, actually, I did. There were some plants I didn't get, but I did get some blueberry, but not very many. And I was ordering for priority 1 people. This I've been told. I've been trying to find out how many plants will be available this fall, and at the moment, it looks like it's only about 170,000. That's a big drop, and I don't know all the details of that. Eric, who kind of is my contact person with CBF, says he thinks that'll be fine. I'm not so sure. I think we may run out. I don't know that we will have as much to offer everybody this time as we did this spring. This spring may have been an anomaly. Let's hope not. Let's hope that, to get to 10 million, they need to get a lot of plants, but they may be facing a shortfall of plant availability. There also, you may order tubes and stakes during this time. And I did remember to bring this part of the show and tell. The tubes and stakes come in 2 sizes. There are tall tubes. Let's see if I can show you here. And the tall tubes come nested in groups of 5, like this. They come in 5 different sizes for the nesting. They have cords here for putting the stake through them. They are 5 feet tall. They come with stakes like this, wooden oak stakes. The oak stakes come in groups of 25. They're good stakes. I tend to write the name of the plant on the stake just because I do planting with a whole lot of different people, and connecting the right plant with the right stake is complicated. And so I write the name on the plant, I write the name on the stake, and my volunteers can match them up more easily. Those are the big ones. Just a second, let me get the small ones. The small stakes, or the small tubes, are much wider. You can see the difference here. And I use them for anything that branches early in its growth pattern. I'll use it for dogwood. I'll use it for redbud. I'll use it for flowering dogwood. I'll use it for, we got some GMO American chestnuts this year, which is controversial, but I got some, not through CBF, but through another source, and that those American chestnut branch right away. Again, a tube like this gives those plants more room to do their natural kind of growth pattern. They also come with stakes about a little bit bigger, about 2.5 feet tall. So when you order, you would also let me know if you want tubes and if you want stakes. If you don't know what size you'd like and you want me to choose that for you, I can do that. When you come to pick them up from me, if you think, I don't agree with you, I'd rather have this other size, I generally have enough that you can kind of pick the tubes and stakes you want, but I need to have numbers so that I can get enough from them. Let's see, as I say, some people prefer cages, and I hope that we'll have time to hear from them about that. The process of ordering takes about 4 weeks. A new priority opens each week. I place order for folk in that priority. When I am ordering for, when I place an order, for instance, let's say that I was placing an order for red oaks, and you just wanted 5 red oaks, and you were the only person in Center County, imagine, who wanted 5 red oaks. So I would have to order at least 25, a flat of red oak seedlings. So you'd get 5, but I would have 20 for other people in other priorities. And the way that I distribute those is that once I ask for orders, the earlier the order, the higher your priority is if I have extras to pass on to people. So the more thought you've given to this ahead of time, so that when I say, okay, I'm accepting orders, the better, okay? Just a second here, let me get to my notes again. Whoops, wait a minute here. Oh, the other thing that is very helpful to me is, so when you send in your orders, please try and give me just one order. I've gotten some people who've kind of been dribbling in their orders, and that just gets very confusing for me. So I'd hope that you could give it enough thought, that you send me a complete order when you do that. The number, as I said, the number of species declines over time. So you may put in an order, and then I have, once I kind of process, it gets to be your week and I process this, I may say that these just aren't available anymore. And I might be able to say, if I have time, here's what is available. Is there something else that you'd want in place of that? But it's a wild week, and I can't promise that I can always communicate with everybody as much as I would like to. One of the advantages of ordering through me is that if we tend to, we've got so many people involved now that we get the benefit if I order 1,000 seedlings, then we get free delivery of plants and tubes and stakes right to my house in Williamsburg. That may be advantageous to you. That might not be advantageous to you. It kind of depends. The other places where plants get distributed is basically Clearwater Conservancy is the furthest kind of west that they go. So if you're in the western area, you might do better if you live in State College of seeing if Clearwater would order for you. I can't promise they will, but they might. Or consider becoming a partner yourself. You can become a partner, order yourself, but you will only get direct delivery if you end up getting at least 1,000 seedlings. When they actually ship the bare roots, those come through FedEx, and so everybody gets that. If it would be to your advantage if you were a partner to get bare roots delivered to you, because they get delivered to me and then I distribute them to you. I live in Williamsburg, so you would need to come and pick up plants from me to get things. The tubes and stakes tend to come earlier, probably maybe even as early as early September. And they can take up a fair amount of space if you have a big order. If you have a big order, you may want to come early and get those tubes and stakes from me and then wait until the plants come and get the plants in, and you've already got your plants, your tubes and stakes, and you're ready to go. But it's okay to get them all at one time too. Let's see. Oh, one of the nice things that happened this last year, and I hope that this would happen more in the future, and I encourage people to consider it, is I had a couple of people, and I don't think they're on the call right now. One gentleman named Gary Bainey down in Bedford County, who kind of became my sub distributor. He was very excited. He planted the first year with me, and then he started getting his friends to do it. And he got people together, and they would come up and pick up together, or he would pick up for them, or they would come and pick up for him, so that you didn't have to do as much driving back and forth. The same thing happened in the Lewistown area. Another gentleman there, Gary Gill, ended up kind of being a distributor and coming here and getting stuff and then distributing it there. The same thing happens in State College. People cooperate and get plants for each other. That's not as big an issue in the fall. In the spring, when we're getting bare roots, the bare roots dribble in. I believe that I'm getting my third portion of my bare root order tomorrow, 6 weeks after the first order, and it will still not be complete. If we get it, we'll have a fourth order. And I don't understand all the reasons for that. Part of it is that, you know, they have to, when you grow bare roots, you grow them in the ground, and then there's a hydraulic process involved in getting them out of the ground. You can't do that when the ground is too wet. You can't do that when the snow's on the ground. And our late winter may have had an impact on that. They are also, I think, is probably a little bit higher chance of crop failure with the bare roots. I don't know. But I think that sometimes a nursery will say they're going to have a plant, they don't, then they have to kind of subcontract it out and buy from other people. And that sometimes takes a while and it gets complicated. So the bare roots have some advantages. I wouldn't say many advantages, they have some advantages. The bare root grower that we've been working with had some really big, beautiful plants with really big, beautiful roots. But they also had some really tiny little plants. You know, they're supposed to be 7 inches tall, and some of them were barely 3. So it's a mixed bag. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, one of the things that you want to be aware of is that the window for planting is much bigger in the fall. We will probably get plants right around 1st of October. And I've planted into December, and I don't see that there's any deleterious effects to that. That's what I had to say. And I'm open to questions. I'm open to old pros jumping in a minute, but let's just start with some questions first. Does anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat, and George can tell me about it. I went fast. There's a lot of things to cover. What's up?
Greg, we've gotten a number of questions, and people with some expertise have answered some of them. I think
Why don't you start reading some of those off then?
Okay. But before I do that, I see that the person listed as owner had their hand up. Did you have a question?
Oh, Jody. Jody, you're muted.
You're muted and we can't hear you. Do you?
It's
unmute.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. I don't know how to fix it to say my name instead of owner, but I'll own it.
That's fine.
Anyway, back to the topic of bird netting. It's controversial. Is that really necessary, especially on the great big tubes? My research shows that those netting things that you put on tubes aren't even available for the great big tubes. So, and we don't use them. Has there ever been an incidence of trapping and killing birds through the planting tubes?
Not for me. But I've been told by Colleen that she has found dead birds.
Okay.
And They don't do nets for the, and I forgot to even mention that those are available. I have a bunch of them. I tend to, in the busyness of planting, to forget about it a lot of times and go back and sometimes put the nets on originally. They're like stockings.
Yeah.
They're all rolled up and there's spaces in between them. It's like a net stocking, and you slip it down over a tall tube and you kind of pull it down, and then it opens you leave it open at the top about the size of a quarter, so that when the leader grows up, it will be able to get through there, and then it will lift the net up, supposedly. Now, I have found this last year, I found 2 instances of birds actually nesting in the small tubes. I had a yellow buckeye that was planted 2 or 3 years ago on the Lower Trail, and we were admiring it because it was just starting to come out of the tube after a couple of years. And I reach in and I said, that looks like a nest down there. And I reach my hand and this bird flies out, and it was a wren, Carolina wren, and she had a nest down there. It was kind of a cavity nest, and the top of it looked like a nest, but she was underneath it, and she came flying out and gave me the hairy eyeball that you wouldn't want to get because I was messing with her babies. I was telling the story to somebody, a friend of mine who plants in State College, the next day, and she said, oh, that's really interesting. And she said, I'm going to go home and work on my garden. And she called me the next day and said, I was working in my garden and I accidentally hit a short tube, and the same thing happened. So interestingly enough, these Carolina wrens are very adaptable, I understand, very adaptive. And they have learned how to nest in these short tubes. But the whole point with the short tubes is they're wider, and that a small bird like that can flap its wings and get out. Whereas in a narrow, tall tube, they don't nest, but they tend to roost. What I've heard anyways, they roost on the top. They see an insect, particularly in early spring when they're really hungry. They dive down and then they can't spread their wings and fly out. But I have not encountered that myself, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody
else have experience with that?
In the comment section, I just thought I'd mention in case some people can't get to the chat. Keith says that the tubes are narrow enough, you don't need netting depending on the pest, and that chestnuts, it's good to put the netting over chestnuts because of the squirrels.
Oh, really? I haven't tried that, but I've never grown chestnut before. Yeah.
If you plant the chestnut and it still has the nut, it doesn't have to, but if it's a seedling and it still has the nut, the squirrel will come and they will eat the nut.
Wow.
I did notice that some of our seedlings still had the nut. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main purpose of netting, so far as I know. I can't think of a bird being so stupid as to get itself stuck in there. I mean, because we live with a parrot, it climbs.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just going by what I was told.
But one problem you do get with tubes is voles. And
is what?
Voles.
Yeah.
Now they'll nest underneath, and if the particular plant is such that they can eat the bark, they will, and they'll kill it.
Yeah.
One reason that we've found the cages to work better. It takes more work and it's not free, but
but the cages aren't going to keep voles out either, are they?
No, but they stay open, so it doesn't make a good nest place for the voles.
I got you. Yeah. It just takes a lot of work.
Yeah. If we had, we had 100, and we made, I don't know, how many cages do we think we made? 50? We get real good at making cages, but still, if we had to do 1,000, it would get old. We're using, for what it's worth, we use 2x4 inch wire, fencing wire, 4 feet tall, because the deer will leave it alone if it's 4 feet. And you cut it 3 times longer than the diameter you want, and then just bend the ends together, make a loop.
Do you stake it too?
We stake it. You could either use the same wooden stakes, or you could use we use just wires bent in a U,
Mhm.
and at the very base, and just so the wire's maybe 4 inches long to 6 inches long, and you just bury the whole thing like a stake.
Oh, you drive it into the ground to
Yeah,
hold the tube.
with your foot.
But this
And
doesn't.
you
Does
just
that
put
keep
3
it
of
from
those
doing
around.
this?
Sorry?
Does it keep it from wobbling?
Yeah, you put 3.
Oh, put 3 on. Okay.
Mhm.
One way to get around the vole problem that I was taught is that there are 2 with these tubes. There's kind of a flange part. I think you can tell here that it flanges, and that's the top, and the bottom is not flanged. And so what I was taught is to take it and to kind of rotate it into the ground about something like that, which will discourage the voles somewhat. Now, I also haven't had a vole damage that I can see. So I don't know, but yeah, voles are definitely an issue. And I think in a snowy winter, they might be more of an issue, is my guess. Because when it's snowy, the voles can get out and move around without having to worry about hawks and owls and things that want to eat them. So, other questions, George?
Yes, Phil had asked, how do the smaller tubes tend to do with deer browsing?
Well, it's not going to prevent it. When they get out of the tube, if depends on whether the deer particularly like it. Spice bush they don't like, is my understanding, and there's some other things that they don't like so much. Kind of depends on what else is available for them. I know some people who will start with a plastic tube and then build a cage once it gets over that. That would be my plan for the American chestnut, for instance, is to start with the tubes, and then when it gets out of there, maybe do it. If it's getting eaten, then to put some caging around there. Yeah. Has anybody who does caging, have you had problems with, do they nibble the branches that grow through the cage openings?
Well, yeah, I guess. But the things we make the cage wide enough so that things don't grow through.
Okay.
The one,
and how wide is that?
well, it depends on the tree.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing that we've had trouble with is it's red stick, isn't it, dogwood, that deer really like, and the red sticks grow tall. They now look kind of like umbrellas. So they've got this cage around them, and they went up. Everything that went out, they ate. So they go up and over the top, and then the deer pull the branches down and break them. Not all of them. And red stick is pretty tough stuff, but yeah, deer.
Yeah. One of the growth. Phil, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've also found for us and our purposes, the caging ends up being a lot of weeding maintenance. I mean, porcelain berry will just completely tent it in, half of a growing season. And depending on the scale, it can be very time intensive to do all that weeding.
Can you reach in through the cage to weed, or do you have to lift the cage? You can?
For us, we pull apart our cages, and we've done, almost probably 4 to 6 foot diameter cages with several different species that we can group and save on the cost of the caging that, will grow together. But until you get the largest species, we usually do a large hardwood or something, and until that grows and starts providing sufficient shade, it's several seasons of intense work.
Yeah.
Another question here was that wondering if anyone has a good hands-on lesson plan on carbon sequestration by trees. Any fellow environmental educators in the group?
I don't have the facts and figures at my disposal, no. It's one of the things is that I think it's a moving target. I think the research is still out, and it's a tricky thing to quantify. And I don't know how speculative it is. Ron, do you know anything about that? Ron's
well, I was I
Go
was
ahead.
going to recommend going to Catherine Hayhoe's website because she has a bunch of great podcasts that address all of these different issues. So if you scale down through her podcast list, you'll find exactly what you want to see, and she keeps it pretty up to date.
And if you don't know, Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist who also happens to be an evangelical Christian, a very interesting combination. And she's quite a spokeswoman for climate change and addressing it.
How do you spell her last name, Greg?
Hayhoe, and it's Catherine with a K. Is that right, Ron?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm even wondering if you go on to Google and if you would type in lesson plans on carbon sequestration by trees, whether you might be able to see something.
Yeah.
You might get something good and you might get garbage. So
Yeah, I would trust Catherine Hayhoe more.
yeah.
Yeah. Or Drawdown. I think Drawdown's research is pretty reliable, everything I've heard. So
Would that be drawdown.org?
yeah, drawdown.org is where the website is. Yeah. Other questions, George?
I think the other question here that a few people answered had to do with, let's see, where do you find people and volunteers? Any advice on seeking out and securing volunteer support with non-native invasive species removal?
Well, Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light kind of starts from the perspective of people of faith. So congregations is where I started, but it's not where I got the best response either. It tends to be that congregations are older nowadays, and I'm older and I still am willing to do this, but a lot of older people aren't. So what I've had good luck with is colleges, particularly small colleges. Juniata College puts out they've created a club just around this, and they have 20 to 40 members, and they will turn out 20 people sometimes. We also work with the Hollidaysburg High School for senior credit towards their service hours, and they come for 3 days every year and get all their service hours in 3 days and do a lot of work. You would think that seniors at the end of the senior year are not your best volunteers, but actually they get into it, and they do very good work, most of them. Not all of them, most of them. Also, my most reliable volunteers are actually closer to my age. Retired people are, if you can find them, who feel physically fit and don't mind getting dirty and like doing this work. I can count 4 of my volunteers on here, and I think very few of us are under 60. There might be 1. And some of us are older than 70. So retired people have time, and that's one place to go, I think, is as a possibility. We're also not in a part of the country that has a huge amount of credence given to climate change. So we've kind of limited the pool here at some extent, but I've got 400 or 500 now who have done it. And some people did it once, some people do it regularly, some people do it once a week or more, so Jody.
There, I unmuted myself all by myself. I'm just going to weigh in here on the value of high school students and junior high students with the Weed Warriors of Fort Roberdeau. It's a 5-year program, and you can get like 60. Like we did just on Earth Day, get 50, 60 students out there. You can clear and plant a lot in just several hours. And the trick is to pay for the busing. It's a couple $100 to get them bussed in. But once you got that paid for, and perhaps one of those little mini grants might pay for it, or perhaps you can get a business to pay for it, or the PTO or something. Anyway, once you get them there, they can do an awful lot of work, and they're really, really, really into it. Heck, I'd get out of math class for a day, wouldn't you? So it might be a good start to get a hold of your local schools and see if they're interested. One of the drawbacks is the number of tools that you need, and your local conservation district or nature conservancy, or I've even had parents bring shovels from home and it works. So anyway, that's a good source for child labor, free.
And one of the selling points for me is that climate change is overwhelming. And anybody who is concerned about it really doesn't know exactly what to do. You know, there's political action, there's contacting your congressperson, et cetera. The advantage of this is work that you can do. You can see the change, you can see the difference. And that's a big deal. And I think kids feel particularly impotent around this and particularly potent when they plant a bunch of trees. And I let them put their name on it. It's their tree. They can name the tree and they love it, you know? So make it fun too. So
I see in the chat that Anna Nicolades has joined us, and she is an associate with the Abington Shade Tree Commission. And she was directed to us via the Abington Environmental Action Committee as a place that might facilitate them helping increase Abington's shade tree canopy. She said, we need all the help we can get.
And this is Abington in Philadelphia area?
Yes, in Montgomery County.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm just a tree crazed maniac, and I actually just got this email about a half hour ago and haven't really had a chance to read what it's all about. But I thought, well, tree lovers, I'm going to jump on and
well,
see
glad
what
to have
happens.
you. One of the things that you missed is that Philadelphia County is a very low priority for getting trees from Chesapeake Bay Foundation, just because you're not in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. However, sign up anyway. Last year, Phil, who was on here a while ago, Phil got 500 trees. Darby Creek, which is also in the Philadelphia area, got 500 trees. Now,
Wow.
This last spring was a bumper crop, and we got a lot of extra trees. But you're the lowest priority, unfortunately. So, and Steve
Even in
Lockhart,
Montgomery
Steve
County?
Lockhart's from Darby. Yeah, because
Oh.
you're in the Delaware watershed. So
Okay, I know very little about that. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good to know. How do I sign up?
send me an email at wacmbook@aol.com. Wacom, WACM book at AOL.com.
Great. Okay,
And I'll put you on the list. Yeah.
awesome. I mean, and let me know if there's anything else that I can do. I'm
Okay.
just here.
Good.
Happy to help. Yeah.
And just to let you know, Anna, this is being recorded, so
Sure.
it can be watched the whole presentation later. If you go to the PA IPL website in a week or two, it should be on.
Oh, great. Okay, that's great to know, and I'll let my associates know as well.
Yeah, at Facebook. Actually, the best place to get it, I think, is on the Facebook page.
Okay.
What's your Facebook page?
I think it's just Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light.
Okay.
I think. Try that anyway.
Okay. Wonderful.
Or contact me and I can get it for you. Yeah. Any
Okay.
other
Nice to meet
questions?
you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you're with us. Any other questions?
George, did you want to talk about?
I had put in the chat earlier, if anybody thinks of any particular topics that you'd like our Central Pennsylvania chapter to cover in future talks, please let us know. We do this once every 3 months, and we have 2 more programs this year and need some ideas, so it would be helpful.
Yeah, I
know.
see there's at least 8 of us from the Blair County, Center County, et cetera. So But the way PA IPL works is it's a statewide organization. There's webinars all the time on all sorts of different topics. Planting is just one thing we do. We do a lot of advocacy. We do a lot of education. We do a lot of spiritual support. You know, and you're welcome to jump in on any of those. So
we have a spiritual spiritual care program coming up. I believe it's oh boy, I think we changed the date on it. There will be information coming out. It's near the end of May, and it has to do with climate justice. If people are interested in that, we'll be sending out emails about it.
And by signing up for this, you will get emails now. PAIPL.org. They're worth checking out. There'll be some good stuff in there. So, yeah. And by the way, as I said, we are an interfaith group. So our executive director is a Muslim. Our board president's a Jew. There's lots of Christians. There's a Baha'i member on with us a little while ago. There's a Quaker on right now. So we're quite a diverse group. Anything else? All right.
Well, I would like to thank Greg for his dedication and for sharing his insights tonight with us. I think that rainbow that shined on you, I think that was a halo to show that you're the chosen one that lead us in this.
Yeah, but I no longer am now. Look at me. I got unchosen.
That was the spotlight from the heavens. And it was gone when you finished your talk. But we thank you all so much for joining us and hope that you'll join us again for our future programs.
So please get in touch. And if there's any questions I can answer or any help that I can give, that's my job. So please get in touch. And you will be hearing, if I get your email, you will be hearing from me in the next couple of weeks. Okay. So take care.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Great and a blessed week. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.